Now, for the next presentation, I would like to invite here on the stage Christopher Lederer. He's Managing Director at Flow Technologies. With more than 18 years of experience within the electronic trading domain, Christopher has a proven track record with exchange trading software development and management. Christopher will talk today about leadership in development. Please.
Welcome. Oh, there's my presentation. You see them as well. My name is Christopher Lederer, was over 20 years meanwhile. We're getting a bit older. Leadership and development. My first question to you guys, who considers himself a leader? One, brave. I think everyone should consider himself a leader if there's something to lead. Everyone has the opportunity to lead, and I want to go through 5 major points here. Disclaimer. It's for me an act of balancing, so trying to find the middle way. I think a lot of people have a difficulty to understand the difference between a boss and a leader, and that's a natural thing because it depends on where you are. If you're working on very simple tasks, you don't necessarily need to be a big leader to get the task fulfilled. Because the difference between a boss and a leader for me is the amount of thought you get from those guys you lead. If you're a boss, you do not expect to get any kind of feedback, you just do the job. If you're a leader, the tasks are more complex, you want to have people running through without you constantly being there, which would be felt as micromanagement, which was one of the biggest problems we usually see in bigger organizations. So, how can you just avoid to be seen as a boss? Because that's where it all starts. It's not what you want, it's what the others see of you. And how to be a leader and still deliver on timelines. Where is this coming from? Why would I say that? Because often in company structures, if you're seen as a leader, is he really delivering? He's nice with his guys, he can have a nice talk. Does he bring anyone forward? Does he deliver on timelines, on scope, etc.? That's a big problem we often see. So let's start. As said before, a boss just reflects timelines. We have to do this, now do it. Don't talk, just do it. Boss and leader always have the same starting point. You have something in the future or something very close by that you want to get solved, that you want to get done somehow. But of course, it's a difference of involvement. As a boss, you constantly go there and say, do this, do that, don't do this, try to do here. And not everyone responds the same way. I think more intelligence you bring to the procedure, more intelligence you bring to the job, more feedback you need to understand what needs to be done, but not by describing the individual procedure, by describing the individual step, giving the greater awareness and be there for you guys. Because I also see the difference in a boss and a leader. If something goes wrong, the boss goes, it wasn't me. And of course that's easy, but it will diminish something which is really important and we'll see later, which is trust. Managers, as I see them, they need for most to be able to listen. Because we all think that we know a lot, but it's not knowing everything, it's also being aware of personalities, being aware of a situation. You might have a wonderful colleague who really responds well on leadership. He might have a bad day and not need a leader. That's really dependent on the individuals as well. Transparency and vision. Without transparency, you don't project. You don't give the room for people to think for themselves. As said, in some ways, sometimes you don't want it. In development, you clearly want it. Because in the end of the day, just think if you're a boss, you define what will happen, what do you get, what you expect. You don't get the best. You don't really compromise with innovation. Innovation should come from a group, from an individual where you have an expectation. And there you have to be a leader. There you have to understand what is necessary to get things rolling, to get things done. And it's not explaining the guy what to do, because then you have the wrong guy at the right spot potentially. Sometimes transparency and vision is a difficult thing, because if we talk about vision, vision has multiple levels. You have a high vision, very high top, we want to be the best. That doesn't transform for someone that is working on the ground. On the ground you have a different vision, and that is very important, that you can transfer your vision down. And the vision as a leader comes from you. It's attached to, hopefully, the company vision. That's why I'm also writing here, a blurry company vision might be actually counterproductive than not having a vision at all. I think it's very, very important that if you manage people, they see you as a guy who tells them what to do. Not how, but what. That's really, really important. If you don't stimulate people to think, the expected outcome is not bigger than the individual. That's more mass than human. The balancing of expectations, often when you get a job given, and then it's said, oh yeah, you have to do this and this and this and this, 80% of the time you miss dependencies. You're not aware of them, they come later. New technology is always prone to error a bit, and you have to cater around that. And of course, as a leader, there you have the biggest advantage, because people will stand with you and not behind you. They will stand with you and will face exactly the same problem. They will have, and they will feel encouraged to go forward, to say like, okay, let's try this, let's do this. And you as a leader, you have to make sure that they keep aligned, that there's a communication ongoing. This is, again, coming back to transparency. In a transparent company, communication is easy. If you have intransparencies, communication will start to suffer. And people will go into silos, just be safe. Just feel it right. It's especially when you give pressure. Of course, as a manager, as a leader, you will face pressure from the business. And they don't really care about your details. They just want something there at a certain moment in time. And of course, you can go back and say, like, guys, do it. You could also go back and say, like, guys, how do we do it? What is the best way for all of us to go forward and potentially deliver? You can't always deliver. There's always something going wrong. There's always something you have to take care of. You haven't thought before. The importance here is to trust. To go back to your guys and say, like, I do trust you. I do believe in you. And together we can do this. Of course, this doesn't happen if you meet someone on the streets and say, like, let's do this together. You should know your guys, and that's why I said listen. You have to listen, you have to understand the capacity, and you have to be willing. You really have to be willing to understand the person. We all know the amazing developers with high creativity that never show up before 11. Because all this creativity took them a bit longer. You have to be able to cater for that. Because in your team structure, this might be a disruption. So you have to ensure that the entire team is with you there. If you start to point out, then you are the leader for the one, and you are just a stupid boss for the other. And that would, of course, again, harm your structure. Not delete, but potentially harm your structure. And you would certainly want to make that a very, very clear thing. The expectation must be shared. If just one has an expectation, then you can have amazing leadership skills, but you're still a boss. You're just a boss. That's very clear to me, maybe to you as well. So, creating trust, or having trust in the very first place, is one of the things that's really, really hard to get. Because of course you're always in a tangible relation. You might say to someone, you have to do better than this. And this is regardless if you're a boss or a leader. Because as a leader, you don't just take everything. You have certain standards to be fulfilled. But you want to have this on a very, very, very transparent and very trustful way. If you don't trust someone, you're not leading him, and you're also not bossing him. It's not possible. So if you don't trust, you don't have any kind of relation. Of course, it's easy for a boss, I don't need to trust, you do that, what I told you, and that's done. Of course, it will not, as I said before, deliver any greater results than the capacity of the individual. And I want always to see that. If you're a leader, you might have the ability to get more out of one person, because it's a part of a team. You lead a team. To lead one person, we heard that before, it's kind of a relationship thing, and that can change every day. Communication, in that sense, oh, thank you, 20 minutes. Do I have 20 minutes or spend 20 minutes? Thank you, sorry. So communication needs fostering. Not everyone communicates the same way, and especially in development, especially with creative minds, it's a bit more difficult. And of course, where there's creativity, you give some room. I'm not sure if you want to give a lot of room in finance because the numbers have to be clear. And creative numbers, rather bring you close to jail than anywhere else. So it depends on where you are. As I said before, it always depends where do you sit in the entire balloon here. One easy thing in development is, of course, that you're not supposedly going into assumptions. If you go into assumptions, if you think this is how it should be, then you have taken the decision already for the others. You should always have this jointly. It's very, very important. I think it's actually pinnacle that within a team that you are leading, there's a given trust and there's a given direction. Because if we all try to walk the same way, we have to have the same vision forward. We have to align to each other. And that's what you try to do as a leader. As a boss, as I said various times before, you put up the lines and you say, like, that's the direction, move. And not always that works, but there's a basic standard you can always set with that. That's why a lot of people, after years, potentially give up and say, like, leadership is difficult because you learn by error. And of course, if you be a leader, you always want to be in harmony. Leadership and harmony is not necessarily the main thing. Leadership and communication is. If you communicate rightfully to your guys, and what is rightful communication, please, that's also a very difficult question. It starts, again, with trust. If I say something to you, I'm not saying that because I want to attack you personally, I have something personal. It's because I, as a leader, have to reflect where we want to go. It's not about not having an idea, not having a vision, not having a standpoint. It's accepting other standpoints, it's accepting other viewpoints, but always keep aligned on what you want to deliver together. That's when leadership also gives you the most. That your employees do really think it's great to work here, it's good to work here because I'm challenged. Someone trusts me, someone communicates with me, someone listens to me. Depending, as I said, on the industry, different methods. In development, I think communication, transparency, and awareness is the main driver for a good leader. Embrace error and celebrate success. I know that sounds a bit cheap once in a while, especially with celebrate success. In our own company, we have around about 80 developers. Of course, you want to see results. And if something goes wrong, people go like, why? What was wrong? Why didn't you cater for this before? Why didn't you see this before? And what do you do? First of all, a post-mortem is nice, but a post-mortem often ends up individualizing a problem, which is isolating an individual, which contradicts any kind of communication and leadership. You should always, in a team, make a team responsible. Of course, you have the odd one who just doesn't understand, doesn't really fulfill, but then it's not your leadership style, then it's the individual. You have to put forward what you want to achieve together. Again, communication and trust. If something now went wrong, you have to go back with the team, you discuss what went wrong, and make sure that next time you do it right. Celebrating success is not the success in the very end of the chain. Let's be very honest, if you have a group of 20 people running, the hard part comes 50 meters before you end the race, not when you ended the race, because then you're done, your swords get lost and you're just happy. So you also have to celebrate success in small steps. Sometimes it's a success if you avoided dependency, if you took away communication barriers, if you simplified communication, if you foster trust. Those are things that really, really mark out for a longer time than just being very directive. So when you celebrate success, it's not the end success. It's where your team, where your company, where your personal efforts made a difference. It is important, because often we start bigger projects and there is no big success. In the end of the day, you got kind of a viable product, and yeah, it took a bit longer, and And then 10 people work for 6 months, and there's no real wow moment, which is sad. Because there have been, for sure, a couple of wow moments in between, where you thought we're getting there, we're doing right. Those moments you have really to take care for and off. If you don't, then you just equalize again everyone. Sometimes teams suffer from individuals. So individuals within the team do not perform as expected. What's the right way to do? How to go for that? Is it the right way to have a long and lengthy discussion with everyone involved, where you say like, oh my God, this is so important, why didn't you? No. First try to understand, as a leader, what was driving you? Why didn't work for you? Maybe there's reasons that are not even professional reasons. There could be personal reasons. You shouldn't spend too much time, but you should be aware. You should listen again why the guy had it. Why is that important? The potential in your team that someone has something from a personal, professional reasoning is high. Every human is individual. Everyone is a bit different. And if you don't get those differences, you will have a hardship to lead. So that's why you have to learn how to take people. And that starts with just listening. Often, especially if you're a young manager, and I did the same mistakes, you just want to move forward, make it quick, make it good. You know, and everyone should be motivated. Not everyone is every day motivated. That's a myth. But you can get people motivated. We have a lot of colleagues that say, it's really nice to work in a small and nice and cozy environment. Even if you have a bad day, you still feel right in the office. And as the pre-speaker said here, that's also a very important point. If you go to work, you should feel encouraged to be there, and you should be able to celebrate success, but also embrace an error. Because the error embracement should always be done, as I said before, in a team. So you should really evaluate, could we avoid this? Was there any given moment in time where we would have done something differently to make the entire thing better, instead of just, okay, we have an error here, and move on. It has to be discussed within the team. Never individualize error, always bring it back to the team, and try to find out if there was an individual reason, but you don't share that necessarily always with the team. I think we're done. Any questions? Was it that boring? You have no questions? Yes, please.
Hello, I'm Gabriela. So regarding your last point regarding how to motivate an individual who is not really performing well or causing errors, how do you find out what's bothering him? Do you have conversations? You said listening.
It starts with a very simple question. Do you feel safe? Do you feel right here? You know, if something goes wrong, you might have a different picture. You might have an assumption, but the truth lies within the individual. So you ask him what he thinks is wrong or right, why he got into this situation. It's a very simple question. You really have just to ask, how do you see the situation? And maybe you get a lot of feedback, and maybe you have to disseminate there. Maybe it's, I didn't like to work with this colleague, he was really strong and never really listened to me. But then you know what the underlying issue is, because that's what you really want to know. Is it the capacity? You know, if you have a capacity problem, you have to develop a strategy, how to bring the guy to speed. Ask the team, help me. But it really starts with the question, what do you think was the issue? Or do you feel right here? Do you feel safe in this environment? It's a very simple question, but the answer might often overwhelm you, because we don't usually ask that question since everything is going right. And especially with individuals, in bigger teams, they might be there in that position for a long, long time, until they break, until the team actually isolates and says, well, it's not really working. So yes, it is listening, but important is the question, do you contribute? Do you feel challenged, and do you feel safe? With one of these three questions, you quickly get to the space where potentially something is wrong. If, it might be you as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else, please?
Okay.
Sorry. I actually have remote teams, various. Besides, of course, using modern communication, it's very important there to be very transparent. The further away, as clear it has to be what is expected. What I often see is when you are in a remote office, you have given chunks. You just give one certain part. And if that chunk isn't really done great, then there's negative feedback. And people say like, That is avoidable to start with. You have to be very, very clear, what is my expectation to that remote team? Where is the responsibility and the ownership for that remote team? What we often see in remote teams is there's something thrown over and you expect something back. It can't work that way. It wouldn't even work in a local team that way. Then there is a frequency of how often you actually be with your teams. You know, it was a big team building structure companies 10 years back. Everyone did team building and it was so important to do team building. Modern communication led that some people said like, I can see the guy. Seeing someone over video or seeing someone face to face makes a big difference. I'm pretty sure about that, but not all the companies who are selling you this amazing life size and WebEx would acknowledge that, because they wouldn't sell the products. So I think it's very frequent. So in my case, I'm here at least every 6 weeks to discuss with the guys, how is it going? And I'm not necessarily discussing the technical aspects. I'm actually discussing the personal aspects. So every employee gets from me the question, how safe do you feel in this moment of time? And safe includes for me, do you feel challenged? Do you feel motivated? And do you have everything that you need to have? Because these questions are never asked in a project phase. They're never asked when work is disseminated. Yeah? And you have to be the one who asks that question to your team. It avoids people running off. It always creates more transparency, and it makes it very easy for you guys to come to you. Because what we see in remote offices is often the feeling, they don't take me serious anyway, I'm so far away, I'm not part of the coffee discussions. Okay, you are not part of the coffee discussions. That doesn't mean you couldn't be part of it. Because next time you see someone, you know, this is a classical situation, you sit in a meeting, you have 20 guys in there and there's 5 guys remote. And those 15 guys left know everything and you know nothing. Because they were standing together at the bus station, at the coffee machine, wherever, and discuss stuff. It is the responsibility of all team members to share information, and not only the boss. This is something you have to create within teams. It's difficult, but it's possible. Did I answer your question? Anyone else, please? Yes, please.
So you ask the questions, you get the answers. What happens if you don't have a solution? Or if you have a solution that can be used at time?
Not having a solution is always bad. Let's be very honest. When do you get to a solution, or how do you get to a solution? First of all, learning by doing. You have to do this over and over and over again. So let's say we go into the solution, in the situation, we have an individual who is certainly a good developer, but kind of has a passive aggressiveness, and you don't necessarily know where it comes from. As soon as you identify passive aggressiveness, you can tackle it, and you should either do this with the team, or you do it individually. Don't get me wrong, if I have a strong developer, I spend 15, 20K hiring him. Why wouldn't I spend another 5 or 10K educating him externally? We do that quite frequently. If we see that someone has an individualized problem, then it's not us to fix it, it's him to fix and us to help. Because if you get too involved, with being too involved in personal issues, because we are kind of referencing personal issues here, which are the most common ones, then you shouldn't be involved too much. You should actually go to your main expectation, that's collaboration, communication, transparency. If one of these cannot be reached, then you check out, does it make sense to invest money and get the guy trained? It's really possible. You know, we have an international environment, we have 32 different nationalities, and all of a sudden you have a big Russian bear, and then you have a small Indian developer. And the Indian one threatens the Russian one, and he goes like, what did you say? Nothing. That's the problem. So I sent the guy and said, like, are you aware of your dominance that you reflect? Are you aware that you scare people that want to have a nice and potentially helpful discussion with you just by how you act? We had the guy in a 10-hour course with a psychologist, and he came back and said, like, changed my life. I was not aware. Because if you're born that way, no one ever said to you. People walked away and said, like, you don't have to discuss with him, he's not going to listen. But you as a leader, as a manager, you have that responsibility. And when you look from an HR perspective, the easiest choice is to say, it's your fault, out. What you do to the team, you cannot measure in money. Because maybe the guy was good, and maybe others said, it's not so bad. But some felt disturbed. So you have to be very, very careful there. And I would always advise, if it's a good resource, if you hadn't had troubles for the last 6 to 12 months, if you tried everything and it doesn't work, then I think you know what to do. If you're doubtful, then get external help. Don't be influenced with assumptions, don't be influenced with garbage you collected over the years and you're not sure what to do with. Give it to someone that can help you. It will be the cheapest solution, I'm pretty sure. Did I answer your question? Thank you. Any more questions? Do I have still time?
One last question.
Thank you. My name is Christina.
Hello, Christina.
Hello. It's more to add what you already said here, so I do agree with what you said till now. It's that to get an honest answer from your team, it's to have that trust and to build that trust. I know you have mentioned during the presentation at the beginning, but I wanted to come back to that because it's very important to have that trust.
Yes.
Because I've been in position that I was asked, but I couldn't give an honest answer due to this. I didn't trust my leader or my company to provide that answer, even if it was a professional or a personal issue.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter if it's professional or personal. It starts with you not feeling the right level of trust. That is a very good question. Has to do a bit with personality. If you're outgoing, you know, if you can joke and you can stand here and do all that, it should be a bit easier. I said one thing before, it's having a constant measure, being there constantly. You know, a lot of managers have the attitude, as long as I don't hear anything, everything is fine. That's wrong. Because things usually build up. And you have to be very close to your guys. So I will always, with my employees, have a very close relation. Every 3 months we sit in a room and we have a very, very professional talk. And every 3 months I will ask him for self-calibration. Self-calibration means you start at one point while you work with people to ask them, how do you feel, how are you? And you ask always the same question. And you give a tendency, you say like 5 is the middle, 0 you're out, and 10 you're super happy, you just like to work. The guy will, next time, when he sits in the room, he gives you a number. And if it's a lower number than before, you know you have an issue. Without even having to go into personality, professional. This is the way to do it. You know, there's no relation that exists only for moments of your life. It's a lifelong thing. As long as you're within the company, you need that trust. And that trust isn't given in the moment, it's given over time. And you have to monitor this time. And self-calibration for me is the best way. I've seen a lot of employees that are super good when it comes to technology, but when it comes to personal, they can't say. But they all can say, I was a 7 before and I'm a 4 now. So you see 3 points down, what happened to you? And then you open a complete different discussion. Seriously, you do. Just because you made it easy to open up. You know, I'm not sure when you had the last time a big conversation with your manager, you always start like, how do I tell him? How? If you just say, I'm not feeling right, and it would be 3 numbers lower than last time, your manager is already intrigued, and he will start asking you questions. Turn it around. You know, the problem lies within the employee, then the employee should be the one who's encouraged to come out. And he should always have this kind of moment in his 3 months evaluation, in his half-year evaluation, to express how he feels with the situation he's in. I think I'm done now. Did I answer your question?
Okay, thank you, Christopher. Thank you so much.